Welcome to this daily digital micro webinar on recording macros. A macro is a set of instructions that can be run multiple times to automate tasks. Macros can be written using code, VBA, but they can also be recorded, which is what I'm going to demonstrate to you today. As I said, macros can be used throughout the Office suite, but it is Excel that has the most prominent use of macros. So I'm just going to share my screen. And this is data from our course evaluation surveys that we send to students and staff, and it's been anonymized. What I want to do is create charts of these columns here. So this column provides a coded response to a question around the content of our training sessions on a scale of 1 to 5. So I want a chart for this column. I want a chart for this column, and some other columns down here as well. In order to make that process more efficient, rather than having to do that from scratch, I can record a macro to automate those actions, which I can then play back. So I'm going to create a histogram of this data. So a histogram groups data by frequency and plots it on a chart. So in order to record a macro, first I need to save my file as a macro-enabled workbook. So in Excel, save it, and I'll call it for Daily Digital. Change it from Excel workbook or CSV to Excel macro-enabled workbook. The second thing you need to do is enable this developer ribbon toolbar on the ribbon. So you do that through File and Options, and then Customize Ribbon, and put a tick in the developer box. That's where you record and play back your macros. For this macro, I need to use relative references. That will take into account the position of my cursor, and it will select the data relative to where my cursor is. So I'm going to turn on relative references. And I'm going to place my cursor in this cell O2 because it's this column that I want to chart initially. Hit record macro to begin the recording and give it a name. And a shortcut key if you like. And I'm going to store this macro in this workbook, but you also have your own personal workbook to store all your macros if you prefer. Now I'm recording, I can perform the steps to create the chart. So I'm going to select the data, go to the Insert tab, Chart Dialog, Launcher, All Charts, Histogram. I am going to format this x-axis . Not the chart area, but the x-axis. Let's select it using the selection drop-down. Horizontal axis. I'm going to change the number of bins or the bin width to 1. So that should group together the responses into bins. So this is responses that have given a rating of 5, 4, 3, and 2 and 1. The other thing I'm going to do then is move this chart to a new worksheet. So that's what I want to do for all of those columns. So I can stop recording the macro now and then play it back for the other columns in this worksheet. So I'll position my cursor here, go to macros, choose the macro that I've just recorded and run it, or I could use a shortcut key. And we get an error. So let's have a look and see what that error is. Well, first of all, note that it has performed some of the actions. It has created that chart. This is Visual Basic. And although it would take a lot of learning to learn how to code directly using Visual Basic, it is somewhat intuitive to understand what's going on. So in this first step, we're selecting a range of cells. And here we are adding a chart. And it's this line here that's causing an issue because it's trying to manipulate this chart called chart 1, which is the one that I created originally. After a bit of Googling, I have found that if I replace this line with this bit of code, that will select the chart with the highest count, so the last chart that was added to the worksheet, and it will activate that and then perform these actions on that chart. I'm going to stop the debugger and I'm going to save that macro with those amendments and try that again. Run that. And now it has worked.